I want to welcome you all here to the live stream, and for those of you that are watching us on the replay, I hope you enjoy tonight's stream or replay, anyways. Today it's July 4th. In the United States, it's a special day. Apparently, it's called Independence Day. I like to refer to it as Treason Day, but that's a matter of perspective, I guess. So I'm actually going to, all joking, so I'm going to talk today a little bit about the other side of the American Revolution, the Loyalists. So I have a little presentation to talk about the Loyalists. I'm going to try that. I'm trying something a little different tonight. As always, I'll take your questions. You can ask them in the chat, or if you have any, if you've sent them into the form, that would be great as well. So just yeah, let me know. Let me know where you're from and how's everything going today, and we'll start right now. So the Loyalists. So there was between 80,000 and 100,000 Loyalist family, and what happened after the American Revolution or during it? Loyalist family, they migrated to the United Kingdom, Canada, and I'm putting Canada in quotes there because I'm going to go into a little more detail about exactly what that means. The Bahamas, Bermuda, Sierra Leone, Jamaica, Florida. Florida was an interesting one because you think of that in the United States, but it wasn't part of the 13 colonies. Or Dominica and St. Vincent. So when I talked about Canada, it's estimated that at least 35,000 Loyalist families, not some individuals, settled in the colony of Nova Scotia, with about 10,000 more Loyalist families settling in the province of Quebec. Now, some historians estimate that there are at least 4 to 6 million Canadians living today. So that's about 1 in 5 who are descended from a Loyalist ancestor. So that's 20% chance if you're Canadian that you have a Loyalist ancestor. So who were they? This is often a mistake that people make. They first of all, they were black, they were white, and they were native. Now, in nationalities, they were English, Scottish, Welsh, Irish, German, Swiss, Dutch, French, Italian, and American. By American, I'm meaning that they were born in the United States. Their families had been there for some time, so they would have considered themselves American. Now, religiously, they were just about every type of Christian denomination you can think of. They are Anglican, Presbyterian, Roman Catholic, Mennonite, Quaker, Dunkers. I'm not sure what Dunkers are. I've heard of them before, but I'm thinking they were similar to Quakers, possibly. Lutherans, Calvinists, Methodists, Jewish. They were Jewish and Congregationalists. Now, are all Canadians who were living in Canada at the time of the American Revolution considered Loyalists? That's a question I've been asked before. And so Loyalists specifically came from one of the 13 colonies. And some historians put the number of Loyalists as a percentage of the total American colonial population as high as 33%. So about 1/3 of Americans or people living in the 13 colonies at that time would be considered Loyalists. So let's talk about, I'm just going to talk about Canada as it exists now and sort of how it existed then. The parts of Canada that we would think of as being Canada now, I'm not going to count the West because the West wasn't settled, but the little bit of the West and northern Quebec is considered Rupert's Land. And Rupert's Land was Western and Northern Canada, and it was controlled by the Hudson Bay Company from 1670 to 1870. Now, the people that had lived there already were fur traders, merchants, and explorers. So then we have the province of Quebec, and this is what I was talking about earlier when I said I was going to explain a little bit by what I meant Canada. So this is the former French territories that were ceded to the British in 1763 through the Treaty of Paris. It's mostly French-speaking at this time, and there were farmers in the rural areas, and merchants, tradesmen, etc., in the cities of Montreal and Quebec. So later, after the American Revolution, the province of Canada will actually divide into Lower Canada and Upper Canada. It's kind of funny the way you think about it, because if you look at it, Lower Canada actually looks above Upper Canada. Always confused me when I was growing up, but it was one of those things you just learned. So Lower Canada is French settlements primarily in what is now called Quebec. And Upper Canada is English settlements in what is now called Ontario. And actually, Upper Canada wasn't officially formed until 1791, and it was because of Loyalists that it was created as a separate colony. There's two provinces that are now provinces in Canada that were colonies at the time of our Confederation that were created because of the Loyalists specifically. So the other one is going to be in here a little bit. So Nova Scotia included what is now New Brunswick and most of modern Nova Scotia. That's the second province that was created, was New Brunswick. It was created out of the part what we call New Brunswick now, which was all the Nova Scotia colony, and it was because there had been a large influx of Loyalists who settled the province. Cape Breton, which is this northern part of the Nova Scotia. It's actually Cape Breton Island, they call it, but it's actually a couple of different islands there. That was a separate colony and it remained separate until 1820. Ile Saint-Jean had been French again. It was ceded in 1763 in the Treaty of Paris. It kept its name Ile Saint-Jean until 1799 when it was renamed Prince Edward Island. So at the time, residents in the Atlantic colony, primarily again was Nova Scotia and Cape Breton. They consisted of British merchants, retired naval officers or army officers as well. Early victims of the clearances in Scotland, there was a group called the New England Planters that had settled in Nova Scotia. Basically, the Nova Scotia government was looking for people to settle, and they invited people from the basically New England to come and farm land. It was after the Acadian expulsion. They were trying to make sure the land was utilized and trying to have it so the Acadians would not resettle. Then we have the foreign Protestants. I did a great video a while back on the foreign Protestants. They were mostly settled around the South Shore, Lunenburg area. They were mostly Germanic. They're from a sort of an area of Germany and also Switzerland and France, where they kind of meet at a triangle, a lot of them. And they settled in the Lunenburg area. They were mostly German speaking. And then you have the Acadians, who were for the most part, had been expelled from Canada, or from the British colonies. A lot of them had hid and managed to survive, and they, at this point, they actually realized they were part of the new colonies. They made attempts through like the New England Planters and the foreign Protestants to try to bring in English settlers. And then you have the Mi'kmaq, which is the indigenous group that is present in Atlantic Canada. So I want to talk just briefly here about Nova Scotia. Most people don't realize Nova Scotia could have been the 14th colony. Nova Scotia had already established as early as 1758. They actually had their own House of Assembly, and they had already established responsible government. There's a great article I'm linking to here. It's the fight for the 14th colony in Nova Scotia. It explains a lot of things in details. Really recommend, if you're not familiar with this topic, to go into it. Another one was I found was Nova Scotia during the American Revolution. It's an article by Bill J. Williams, and the link is there. Basically, the push to have Nova Scotia, there was a few of these New England planters. There was one or two specifically, and some people around religious grounds, along with some of the revivals that were happening in New England at the time. They felt there was a great awakening. There's some religious leaders that felt that this revolution was going to be a wonderful thing for them religiously as well. That's one of the things that's talked about in particularly in the second article there. He talks a little bit about that. But in general, there was reasons why Nova Scotia could have, and there's reasons why they didn't. It really came down to, at this point, they were still really in the early stages of their settlement and getting settlers. They were trying to attract people to come there. And again, with a lot of the people that were there had a real strong loyalty to the crown, because they had taken retired military officers and had given them grants of land even before the Loyalists and the Revolution, to try and encourage people to settle. And it was a very important shipping port, and a lot of the shipping merchants and businessmen, they actually thought it would be a better deal for Nova Scotia as far as trade if the 13 colonies were cutting themselves off from England, that Nova Scotia, and specifically Halifax, would be the new main port and gateway to North America. So this is where the Loyalists settled, and I'm really going to concentrate on Atlantic Canada here, but this is in general, and this is going to show you the split. Like I said, in 1890, I think it was 1891, when Upper Canada became a separate province. So you had the province of Upper Canada and the province of Lower Canada, and together they were the colony of Canada. New Brunswick became a colony. Nova Scotia and Cape Breton were colonies. Eventually, Cape Breton joined with Nova Scotia. So they were the four original colonies that entered Confederation: Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. Prince Edward Island, or Ile Saint Jean, did not enter Confederation until 1873. So you see this green area. These are the places where the Loyalists settled. And if you notice, if you're familiar with any maps you ever see of Canada, and how the majority of our population is within certain distance to the American border, that's very true from here. And it's because and one of the reasons is because of the Loyalists. The Loyalists did set up shipping and trade along the St. Lawrence. It was very easy if they had come from New York State, and they were basically now, or Vermont, and they were now just basically on the other side of the river. So if we look specifically at Atlantic Canada, so in New Brunswick, there was 15,000 Loyalists. They believe that arrived in New Brunswick. They found that St. John, the St. John's actually is very prideful of their heritage as being a Loyalist city. It's where that most the general of renown, Benedict Arnold, where he first came to after the Revolution. He was in St. John, and he tried to set up business. He eventually went back to London. I think one of his sons stayed in St. John. Then we have in Prince Edward Island, there's about 2,000 Loyalists, and they are primarily along the Baddeck Bay and Summerside area. They found that what's now the city of Summerside. That's actually very close to where I live. In fact, I lived right next to the Baddeck. I'm part of I'm going to hopefully be part of the Quebec Historical Society this year, as I was nominated for the board. And it's a very little community of Quebec. It's a small little village. It's really cute. It has a great historical society, has a school house where Lucy Maud Montgomery, the writer of Anne of Green Gables, had taught at. They moved the location, but it's the original schoolhouse. They preserved, and awesome roof. Yeah, so that's, and in fact, Quebec has a Loyalist weekend every August. It's, I believe, the weekend of August 18th this year. It's in that weekend. There's a lot of events going on. So your 5 times grandfather, William Lundy. Awesome. 5 times great grandfather. 4 times great grandfather. Awesome. There's a King's Loyal Ranger with the Jessup brothers and Justice Sherwood. Yeah. So these in Nova Scotia, you have a lot of communities that were specifically founded because of Loyalists. You have Digby. You have Shelburne. It's a pretty famous one that was a large port where a lot of the Loyalists actually wound up coming when they shipped up from New York, which is where the majority of Loyalists came from. They came from all the colonies, but there was a strong number of them from New York as well as the Carolinas. And Guysborough, which is, you get closer to Cape Breton, there's Loyalist communities up around there. There's a few in Cape Breton, mostly around St. Peter's. Going back to PEI, there is also some settlement along the eastern side of PEI, which there would be Loyalists had settled there as well. Nova Scotia, they settle in a lot of the traditional places as well. You'd have Annapolis, Royal, places that were already established, but Shelburne, Guysborough, and Digby really became communities because of the Loyalists. Well, that's awesome that you have those mustard records. Yeah, there's a lot of records out there for people that have Loyalists in their family. There are also the Black Loyalists. Now, Black Loyalists were people of African descent who sided with the Loyalists during the American Revolutionary War. In particular, the term refers to men who escaped enslavement by Patriot masters and served on the Loyalist side because the Crown had guaranteed their freedom. This is a lot of them are settled in Nova Scotia. In fact, there's a few Black Loyalist settlements, Shelburne being one of the particular ones, and down on the southern shore below southwest of Lunenburg, and I guess really just sort of southwest you'd consider, or towards Digby. But there was specifically in Shelburne, there was a lot of these Black Loyalists. There's still many people, Black Loyalists families in Nova Scotia, people that can trace their roots to there, and they are pretty active in the historical community in Nova Scotia in understanding their history and being appreciative of it and where they came from. Now this is my favorite Loyalist story. It's about Flora MacDonald. People who are familiar with Scottish history might know that she was the one, the one who is Bonnie Prince Charles, who helped sneak him out after he was trying to escape to France. She's the one who hid him in his boat and sneaked him away from the Isle of Skye. She was eventually arrested it was in 1746. She was arrested and actually placed in the Tower of London. In 1747, she was released because of a general amnesty. She married her husband, Alan MacDonald, in 1750. In 1774, they moved to North Carolina. This is North Carolina, sorry. To North Carolina, they had been having some issues farming. There was some problems, and they went there to to basically farm. They had some land. During 2 years after she arrived in 1775, her husband Allen raised the Anson Battalion of the Loyalists of North Carolina militia. He was eventually captured, and he was let go because of a prisoner exchange. She had stayed in North Carolina, and what happened in 1777, their property was seized and she was evicted. She was kicked out. In 1778, she joined Allen, who had been given command of the 84th Regiment of Foot of Nova Scotia, and she only lasted in Nova Scotia for 1 year. In 1779, she returned to Scotland because it was a hard winter for her. So who were considered loyalists? So they were the residents of American colonies who joined the Royal Standard supporting the King George III. So again, if you were British and you already lived in Canada, you weren't a loyalist. So you had to have joined and supported King III before the Treaty of Separation. Others that were considered loyalists were those who were persecuted, had their land confiscated, and who had fled the USA for a territory remaining under British rule and to demonstrate their loyalty. A soldier who served in an American Loyalist regiment and disbanded to Canada is considered a loyalist. And members of the Six Nations of either the Grand River Bay or Quinte Reserves who resettled in Canada, they are automatically considered loyalists as well, because their tribe was supporting the British in the American Revolution. So proving your ancestry, this is a little bit what you're talking about, Ruth. If you want to prove that you're a loyalist, or it's anyone basically with loyalist ancestry can document this ancestry by applying for a loyalist certificate. It's similar to the Americans have the Daughters of the American Revolution, the Sons of the American Revolution. It's a similar type thing. So if you talk to one of the United Empire Loyalist associations, their branch genealogists will provide an application and give you guidance on it. But once your family members has proven their ancestry, it's easy for other members to reference this first certificate and get their own certificates. So basically, if you prove that your ancestor was a loyalist, if you have a cousin who's descended from the same ancestor, that ancestor has already been proven, so it's a lot easier for them. This is what a certificate looks like. So people who prove this will not only get the certificate if they're part of the United Empire Loyalist Association, they also get to use the post-nominal letter UE after the name. It means the unity of empire, and it's actually Canada's only hereditary title. So if you want more information, check out the United Empire Loyalist Association. There's their website. So that's basically it as far as who the loyalists were and what you do. There's a couple of misnomers, like I said, people have. They often think that because you were British and in North America at the time of the American Revolution, you're automatically a loyalist. Well, the loyalist isn't just that you were a member of the subject of the British Crown. It's you had to prove your loyalty by either leaving or you had participated. Awesome. Yeah, a lot of people, they find that when they're proven on one side, they're proven on both. From my personal ancestry, I don't have any loyalist background that I know of, because I've been able to trace my roots all to where they came, and they originally settled almost exclusively in Nova Scotia. Is where they arrived from Europe. One line of my family had been in Newfoundland, and then in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they wound up moving to Nova Scotia. So unfortunately, that does not qualify me as an Empire Loyalist. Even though I do have family that was British subjects that were living in Canada, in Nova Scotia at the time of the American Revolution. So there we go. So I usually answer questions in these. One of the things that a lot of people want to know is about how easy it is to find Loyalist information, Loyalist records. It's actually fairly decent. As Ruth Spriggan, the fact here, she's been able to find a lot of different information and records, and there's a lot of the Loyalist associations, as well as a lot of communities that were founded by Loyalists, have places where they have a great storehouse of these records, and they're usually pretty welcoming as far as sharing them if you're doing research. And when you're talking like about that with that type of ancestral research, again, it's great to have those sources that you can get. The people there are fairly generous in sharing them. People that are Loyalists, they do take very much pride in that fact, and they are really an important part of Canadian history. Like I said, 1 in 5 people, they say, can trace a Loyalist ancestor. If you have family that was in Canada before 1793, it's probably even higher in most cases, unless they happen to be part of the people that were here already. Yes, the history of New York has a lot of good documents. There's a lot of different places, and the New England Genealogical Society, they have a great records about the Loyalists even, and a lot of records about them when the Loyalist ancestor while they lived in the United States, and help you dig back farther. I've known people that have been really accommodating, having them help get those records. I guess it helps that we're on a little friendlier terms with the United States than we were 248 years ago. So yeah, behind me is the Union Jack. That's the current Union Jack. That would not be the flag that the Loyalists would have, because at that point, Northern Ireland wasn't represented on the flag. Excuse me, I just need to hydrate. Oh, awesome. Yeah. There's not as much really as far as popular culture. You won't find a lot of popular culture in the American Revolution where it does a decent job in portraying the Loyalists. The AMC series a couple years ago about the Culpeper conspiracy. What was that called? Was it called Washington Spies? They did a fairly decent representation of the Loyalists there. Yeah, Turn. It was called Turn. Yeah. I found they did a fairly good representation of who the Loyalists were. Generally the American Revolution wasn't as popular as people think. If you're even looking at American historians, they will tell you at the time, people didn't really get as hyped up about it as you're made to be, you think, through popular culture. Like I said, there was 33% of the population was Loyalists. Probably 33% of the population, maybe 40% were Patriots, and the rest, the other almost third, probably were, didn't care one way or the other. It's only when the American Revolution started affecting them directly that a lot of people became more involved there. Yeah, the Loyalist land grant records. That's one of the really, in Canadian history, it's sometimes it's hard to find land grants for other people, but the Loyalist land grants are fairly well documented, because the British military, it was part of, again, to try to populate British North America, to keep the Americans from entrenching further. There was they really went out of the way to try to make sure that the people had grants of land who were Loyalist, people who served. The Black Loyalists even had grants of land, though it was a smaller portion, which is not fair by today's standards, and not really by any standards. But they were still better off than, for the most part, than they would have been in remaining in America, where they wouldn't have been able to own land. But yeah, so those records are really there. There's a lot of really good records out there. And again, you can find those because the British, the British Army, like any army, they're meticulous record keepers. So the same as that's why we have the muster lists and stuff. Militaries, much better than governments at keeping records, it seems. And when you can find those records, you can find somebody in the military, and you can find the military records. You'll often find a lot more information in them, no matter what generation they were from, it seems, than if you find just the public records that are available for people at that time. A lot of newspapers as well. There's some that have been preserved. Some have been, some American papers from time have detailed records of Loyalists, because basically they were being persecuted, and they were proudly announcing that and in the newspapers and letting people know who was who, so to speak. So you can find those records. Yeah, the non-commissioners got 100 acres, and officers got 200. If you had a wife and a child, you got an extra 50, and 50 acres for the child, which is a 200. So 200 acres is a pretty good lot of land. And unfortunately, a lot of the places, the surveys that they did in lands, they really weren't well surveyed. Nobody had actually gone there before, and the little bit of surveying they didn't necessarily pick the most arable land for people, or places that would be in the best conditions. Loyalists were a really big part of Atlantic Canadian history, and Canadian history in general, because at that point, again, as I mentioned, wasn't until after the American Revolution, when you got Upper Canada, or Ontario, got formed. So that's a very important part, and New Brunswick being formed, but also the influx that they had in Nova Scotia, which was the center of sort of commerce and trade. Didn't wind up being as quite the hub that they were hoping for, but there was a definite influx that created new communities. That the two things that created a tax base, and for these landowners, for the governments to be able to support it, created people to purchase the products that some of these merchants had, the traders that were also coming from Europe to Nova Scotia to set up shop, provided locations for them. It provided a lot of the structure that was essential for society. The Anglican bishop, Bishop Inglis, who was the first Anglican bishop of Nova Scotia, again, remember that includes New Brunswick. He was a Loyalist. He was an Ulster Scot, but a Loyalist. He founded the first university in Canada, the University of King's College, which my proud alma mater, where I went to study for 3 years. So that was really important as far as setting up higher education in Canada, to get that start, to get the church organized. The foreign Protestants they'd taken into to Nova Scotia in the 1750s. Again, they were the reason that the British government enticed them and got them to go. They were looking for people to settle, but they were specifically, and it wasn't even that they weren't French, because a lot of these people were French and Germanic. They were Swiss French for the most part, but it's because they weren't Catholic. So they had the people that didn't necessarily have any formal churches established that have trained clergy, because there wasn't a place. So it helped get some of that stuff established. Changed very much the look of Halifax. It was a military city until that point. It was a center of that its commerce was basically there to serve the Navy, and then the Navy officers brought a lot of new commerce, new people to Halifax that would be that there was businesses that would be able to support, and these people that settled earlier would be able to also enjoy the benefits of. And again, it's a whole new community set across Atlantic Canada. If we go back and we look at that map there I showed you, if we look here in Atlantic Canada, you'll see all along the ports, all along this, in New Brunswick, the St. John River Valley. These were important places to fortify, to keep the Americans from invading again, and also to help keep. They were places that would be, general centers of commerce. There was ports that would take ships. So Halifax was the main port. There were ships landing from Europe in a lot of these places, and it also provided people to farm land. People buy the farmland, the farmers that were already there, to purchase their crops in some cases. Establish towns and cities. There's so much benefit that they brought to Canada. Things wouldn't have happened as speedily in setting up Canada. New Brunswick probably wouldn't have been separate provinces or a separate colony at this point. And same as Ontario, without the influence of the Loyalists. You have Acadians from Nova Scotia in your tree as well. That's awesome. But no Loyalists. Around Port Royal, and actually a lot of Loyalists wound up going to Port Royal when they renamed it Annapolis Royal. It did become one of the landing spots for some of the Loyalist ships, and that area and around Digby. You do have some very, very concentrated Loyalist communities there. Okay, so we're coming up at 40 minutes there, and just 41 minutes. I'm getting ready to wind it down. I'm just going to check a couple things because I didn't check this before I left. Not left, but before I went and got on, I have a form that people can fill out with questions that they might have. And this is on all my videos. You can find this form at any point if you have any genealogical questions, and I will try to answer them now or in a future video. So I'm just going to double check to see if there was anything, as I invited people to ask a question today, and they might not be here. I want to make sure I do get them and do not miss their questions. So so yeah, okay. I didn't have any that I didn't specifically review. A couple that didn't relate to Loyalists that I sort of reviewed in my overview of who the Loyalists were. Family history is the great. I love family history, and the reason it's so important to me is so many people do not get to learn history. They don't teach it the same way, I guess, in schools, as or people just don't seem to retain it. I find that history now often is, well, like most things, is taught to so you can pass the test, not so you can understand it and so you can learn from it. Whereas we really we need to learn from history, and family history is a great way, because it makes, when you start learning about their family history, you learn about the times they lived in and the historical events that happened around them, and it makes that history impersonal. It makes it meaningful to you. And yeah, it's the greatest step into learning history, is learning your own family history and genealogy. So I'm gonna get ready. I'm just about there. I always do my last call. So
last call. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time I need to announce it's last call at the bar. Oh.
So this is the last call for questions. If you have a question that you want answered, you can ask it now in the chat, and I will try to answer before I go. And yeah, reason it's last call is originally my live stream was called the How We Got Here Genealogy Happy Hour. The idea was it to be a very social, engaging event with conversations like this going back and forth through. Drop me a message on my email sometime. I'd like to learn more about your ancestors and chat with you sometime. You can find my email by looking on my YouTube page and checking out the description. I would also recommend, if you're into looking for some other videos I've done about the Loyalist. I've done a few with author Brian McConnell. I've talked to him a couple times about Loyalist, and I've also talked to him about the Ulster Scots, or the Scots Irish, as some people call them, and you can find them on. They are in the link to all the previous live streams. I'm just seeing it. There's a couple particularly, or in the Settlers of Atlantic Canada, you can find links to those as well. Playlist. Oh yeah, you'll like Brian's books. I cannot recommend enough of the books that Brian does. In fact, he was my first guest on my first episode of the Genealogy Happy Hour. So if you look on my page, you'll find him there. So seeing as I don't really have any questions, I can talk to you all night, Ruth. I'd love to, because I do love to talk genealogy and family history. Interestingly enough, I today was a fairly. I work for a company that does work for an American company, so today was a pretty quiet day. So it helped me get caught up on work, because in Canada I was still working, because it's not a Canadian holiday, obviously. And though the client I deal with in the United States, he asked me, he goes, "Do you guys have July 4th in Canada?" I said, "Yes, every year. And we also have the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th. So you've been doing genealogy since 1979, yeah. I started 33, 34 years ago. I started when I was in university. I'd been interested in genealogy before then. I'd done a little bit, but not a lot of my own research, and starting to dig. Yeah, I got it was actually I got a family tree that was made in 1979 of my mom's father's family, and that was my first inkling. Was after I got that, I was exploring it, and it really, when I started looking at it and trying to figure out how long ago these people were, and the little bit of information it had on them, and I've been able to find a lot more since I started researching myself, because more stuff is available now, or at least more easily accessible. Yeah, you just you have those close connections, and it's amazing what you'll find. And it's some of the best history that you will find when you start digging up your own family. You start looking at things. I studied medieval history at university, so and Canadian history, but I primarily specialized in medieval history, so I never really got into that part of Europe history that would have been my immigrant family. I really wasn't. I knew nothing about the Highland Clearances in Scotland. I knew of the potato famine, but I didn't really know what effects it had and how that affected the population growth in settlement in North America, and how my own family was affected by that. I'm just, I'm dumbfounded by stories like the one Flora McDonald I shared, who went from being arrested for high treason to actually being a loyalist, because that just tells you there was something right that she must have fought, and her husband must have fought in the loyalists. And oh, that's interesting. Yeah, once you start, it's hard. It's hard. Once you start, you don't want to stop. I remember I was looking. It's interesting enough, because of a murder. There was a ship captain in Halifax that was a relative, not a direct ancestor, but one of those lateral ancestors, who was murdered with an axe, him and his wife, in their ship, and it's never been solved, the murder. So I was interested in looking and reading up about it, and it was one of the first things I stumbled across on when I started doing my own research. And I got lost in a rabbit hole of reading the police reports from the late 1800s in the city of Halifax, around the period there, and I felt like I got to know some of the people of the city, at least who the town drunks were, and who were in trouble regularly, because their names would show up. And when you start doing this and you start looking at these other things, it can be really, you can really get yourself engulfed. And I found myself finding stories of people not related that I just wanted to find out more because they had this bizarre attachment to this case that I was looking for. Yeah, yeah, you do get some interesting stories. Some things, some people, I guess, because they're far enough detached from you. You don't have to feel that personal shame that when you find out some of the things some of your relatives did. You just find the interest and the intrigue in it. But then it's funny how the same level of ancestor, if there's something that they did that you'll find that pride in as well. Yeah, there's a lot of secrets that you can find buried in your family tree. You just got to go looking and know where to look. Like I said, Ruth, drop me an email. That would be great. I'd love to chat with you more. We can rearrange talk, and I might hit you up if you'd be interested in being a guest on one of my live streams. I just changed the time recently. I stopped doing it for a little bit over the early part of the summer just because the weather here has been kind of hot, and it's in my office where I stream from. If I want to be cool in the day, I have to have the window open, which leaves a lot of noise, and it's not good for recording. So I thought I'd start doing my live stream, trying it a little later. Usually I try for about 6:30 Atlantic time on Thursdays. It had been where I had been doing it, but for the rest of the summer I'll probably do it in the later evening, just because it's a little quieter. You're in Ontario, yeah. Retired. Yeah, it's funny. I'm anxiously working towards retirement, and so I can spend more time doing research on my own family tree. I probably do, and I do a lot for a lot of other people. So I really need to start spending some time on my own. And anyways, I'm going to say goodbye, and you have a good night, everybody. And we'll talk to you next time. And thank you very much for engaging, Ruth. I really appreciate that. I love when my audience chats in. Usually there's a few more people around, but not all of them are always wanting to talk. So I really do appreciate it. You have a great day. And, make sure you keep searching for your ancestors. Try to find some new ones. Or if you don't find a new one, find something new about them every chance you get. Go looking and go digging.
Things change. Farewell, my friend. Things change. Farewell, my friend. Farewells, they're not forever. They mean I'll miss you till we meet again. Things change. Farewell, my friend. Things change. Farewell, my friend. But farewell.